In this video, you will learn how to play the Najdorf variation with black, which is considered by many grandmasters to be the best defense for playing for a win against king's pawn openings. After the moves e4 c5 the Sicilian defense is set up, which is one of the best defenses against e4. Black advances with his side pawn and takes control of the d4 square. In this way, he prevents white from occupying the center with his pawns through the d4 move. At the same time, he avoids the symmetry that would occur with e5. This will unbalance the position and allow black to play for a win. Now, one of the most commonly used moves is the knight f3. White takes control of the d4 square so he can advance in the center with d4 and recapture with the knight if black captures the white pawn. Although black will retain a central pawn majority, however, the game will remain open, and white will place a knight in the center, giving him good opportunities to develop his pieces and organize an attack. Black can play d6, taking control of the e5 square to prevent white's pawn from advancing. Black's plan is then to attack with the knight f6 and attack the e4 pawn without allowing the e5 move. White can play d4, occupying the center with his pawns. Black responds by taking d4, eliminating an opponent's central pawn and exchanging it for his flank pawn, leaving black with a central pawn majority. After the knight, he takes d4. Black plays the knight f6, attacking the e4 pawn and forcing white to defend it. White can play the knight c3, developing his queen's knight and defending the e4 pawn. And now black plays a6, entering the Najdorf variation. This move was originally used by Opasensky, but it owes its name to the Polish-Argentine grandmaster Miguel Najdorf, who frequently used this variation, demonstrating its great potential for black. Later, the brilliant Bobby Fischer and also Garry Kasparov used it almost exclusively as their favorite defense, achieving great success and enriching it with new ideas. The Najdorf variation is considered the best defense for black, and virtually all elite grandmasters have used it at some point. With the Najdorf variation, black can play to win without overly compromising his position and without taking too many risks, as it is a strategically very solid defense, in which the pawn structure is unbalanced and black enjoys a central majority, which offers him very good chances of winning. The Najdorf variation is rich in tactical and strategic ideas, allowing you to perfect your general understanding of chess, your tactical and combinatorial vision, and improve your playing level in every way. In addition, you will have a repertoire of openings that will serve you forever, at all levels. It is a strategically very sound defense and offers excellent chances of playing for a win, as there are very few lines that allow white to simplify the position and bring the game to a quick draw. On the other hand, it is a very dynamic and flexible defense and allows for many different interpretations, making it suitable for different styles of play. The main strategic idea after move a6 is to play move e5, to expel white's knight from the center but not allow it to advance to the b5 square. At the same time, black prepares for the advance of the queenside pawns with b5. However, black normally only advances with e5 when white's next move doesn't make a move that directly fights for control of the d5 square. For example, after bishop e2, g3, bishop d3, h3, black can respond with e5. However, if white plays bishop c4, controlling the d5 square, or bishop g5, possibly pinning the knight on f6, which is the defender of the d5 square, black must move e6 instead of e5, otherwise it would be more difficult for black to fight for control of the d5 square. The Najdorf variation leads to very complicated positions, where the outcome is far from clear and both sides have their chances, guaranteeing a very tense struggle, only suitable for brave and aggressive players. The a6 move is a very flexible move and is generally very useful in the Sicilian defense. On the one hand, it takes the b5 square away from the white pieces and, on the other, prepares the attack on the queenside, making the advance with b5 possible. Black's structure is very flexible and allows for an advance in the center with e6 or e5, depending on the circumstances. And they can also develop their queen's knight via the d7 square or the c6 square. Often, the black king remains in the center without castling, but it is well protected by its two central pawns, allowing black to play well even with its king in the center. For example, if white plays bishop e2, developing his king's bishop and preparing to castle. Black can play e5, attacking white's knight and expelling it from the center. Now, the best retreat for white's knight is knight b3, since if it retreats to the f3 square, it will block the f-file pawn, and white won't be able to easily attack with f4. After knight b3, black can play bishop e7, developing his king's bishop and preparing to castle. White can castle. Black can castle. Here we can see a typical position of the Najdorf variation. Black has a rear pawn on d6, which can be pressured along the d-file. The d5 square is also weak, and the white pieces can make good use of that square. However, it's not easy for white to exploit the weakness on the d5 square, since occupying that square would only lead to piece exchanges, which normally makes black's defense easier. Furthermore, the d6 pawn is well defended, and since black has advanced with e5, he has balanced the central situation and expelled white's dangerous knight from the center, preventing many tactical possibilities. On the other hand, white's attempts to break through would create weaknesses that black could exploit. For example, after the a4 advance, the b4 square would be weakened. Or, if white decides to attack by advancing with f4, then the e4 pawn becomes vulnerable and can be attacked by black's pieces. In this type of position, black's plan is to advance with b5, followed by the b7 bishop and pressure against the e4 pawn. Black can increase the pressure against the e4 pawn by maneuvering knight b to d7 followed by knight to c5. Another very common maneuver is to occupy the c-file with a rook on c8, and, at the right moment, sacrifice the exchange by capturing on c3, thereby leaving the e4 pawn unsupported and ultimately capturing it. Furthermore, the exchange sacrifice with a rook takes c3 completely destroys white's queenside and offers black many winning options. Another option for white after the move a6 is to continue with bishop g5, developing the queen's bishop and pinning the knight on f6, which then forces white to fight for control of the d5 square. Now, black's best option is e6, with the aim of recapturing on f6 with the queen and preventing his pawns from being doubled should white decide to capture on f6. Black's plan is to continue with moves like bishop e7, b5, bishop b7, knight b to d7, etc. Now, white's best option is to play f4, with the aim of attacking with e5. However, it would be inaccurate to play queen d2, with the aim of quickly castled queenside, since black can play h6, attacking the enemy bishop and forcing it to make a decision. This move isn't normally possible in the Richter-Rauzer variation, but since black has already played the move a6, it is possible to play this move. Now, it's a mistake to retreat the bishop with the bishop on h4, since black plays knight, takes e4, and wins a pawn, as white's queen is under attack, as is the bishop on h4. For example, in the case of the queen on f4, defending the queen and the bishop. Now black simply plays knight on f6, retreating his knight to a safer square. Black consolidates his position and has an advantage. After the move h6, the bishop on e3 isn't good for defending the bishop either, since black plays knight on g4, aiming to eliminate the important dark-squared bishop. Black has a very good game, since he has managed to eliminate this important bishop, and white's attacking opportunities are greatly reduced. And if after the move h6, white plays bishop, takes f6. Black simply responds with the queen, takes f6. Now we see the advantage of having already played the move a6. Since the knight b5, which would win a pawn in the Richter-Rauzer variation, is now unavailable. However, in the Najdorf variation, black controls the b5 square and has everything defended. Black has won the bishop pair and is playing a very good game. For example, if white now castles queenside, black can play knight c6, developing his queenside knight and threatening to capture the d4 knight, with the idea of exchanging pieces and simplifying the position. White can retreat his knight to the b3 square. White's plan is to advance his kingside pawns to attack in that area. Black can play queen d8, with the idea of following the e7 bishop. After f4, black plays the e7 bishop. White can play the e2 bishop, completing the development of his minor pieces and connecting his rooks. Black can play the d7 bishop, completing the development of his minor pieces. After g4, white prepares to launch his kingside pawns into the attack. Black can play queen c7, aiming to castle longside and place his king in a safe position, away from the opponent's attack. Black has very good play. After the move e6, the best move for white is f4, beginning to advance his pawns on the kingside, with the idea of attacking on this side of the board. White can attack on the kingside or in the center, advancing with e5. Now, black has many options at his disposal. For example, he can play bishop e7, developing the king's bishop and unpinning the knight on f6. This move is considered the main variation. Another option for black is queen b6, which is a very interesting move and was a favorite of Bobby Fischer. Black escapes from the pin and attacks the b2 pawn, which is left unprotected once white's queen bishop has developed. This leads to the poison pawn variation, which is arguably the sharpest opening variation in existence and one in which many games have been played. Knowing the theory is essential for entering this variation, and black has a good chance of winning if he can defend properly and repel the opponent's attack. Another calmer option for black is h6, immediately attacking the white bishop to break the pin and relieve the pressure. After bishop h4, black can now play queen b6. This is a delayed poison pawn variation, as black has interpolated the move h6. The idea of this variation is that it is now no longer possible to defend the b2 pawn by moving knight b3, as black plays queen e3 for check and then captures the f4 pawn, giving black an advantage. Another option for black after the f4 pawn move is b5, which is the Polyagevsky variation, a very interesting and risky variation. Black does not avoid the pin and quickly prepares the counterattack on the queenside. They can continue with moves like bishop b7, knight b to d7, etc. Black's idea is that if white plays e5, then d takes e5 follows. And after f takes e5, black plays queen c7. And if e takes f6, black plays queen e5, check, and then captures the bishop on g5, regaining the piece with good play. Another option for black after the move f4 is knight b to d7. Developing the queen's knight, this will strengthen the defense of the knight on f6 and, at the same time, strengthen control over the e5 square, preventing white from advancing in the center with e5. The move knight b to d7 is the typical move that black almost always plays in the Najdorf variation. The advantage of developing the knight to the d7 square, instead of the c6 square, is that on d7 it does not block the long light square diagonal, and black's queen's bishop can develop to the b7 square and remain active, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. In addition, the knight can reactivate to the c5 square, increasing the pressure on the e4 pawn, which is one of the main strategic issues in the Najdorf variation. After the f4 move, it is also possible to develop the queen's knight to the c6 square. Normally, in the Najdorf variation, the queen's knight almost always develops to the d7 square. However, in some cases, it can also develop to the c6 square. For example, in this position, white has already played the bishop g5 and f4 moves, and black's squares have been weakened in his own camp. After the f4 move, the bishop on g5 has its retreat blocked and cannot retreat to e3 should it be necessary to defend the knight on d4 again. Therefore, the move knight on c6, attacking the knight on d4, makes perfect sense, as black begins to put pressure on white's position by attacking against the dark squares. Furthermore, another advantage of developing the knight to the c6 square is that the action of the bishop on c8 is not blocked, and therefore the e6 pawn is better protected. Furthermore, compared to the Richter-Rauser attack, black has better options because he has already played the a6 move. However, in this case, this move is too risky, as black does nothing to break the pin, and white could seize the initiative and attack. For example, after knight takes c6, black plays b takes c6. And white can play e5, attacking in the center. The black knight is pinned, and black must respond with h6 to counterattack white's bishop. After bishop h4, black must play g5 to break the pin and try to defend. After f takes g5, black plays the knight d5 and has managed to save his knight, but white plays the knight to e4 and attacks strongly. White has a dangerous initiative and will be able to mount a very strong attack. After the move e6, another possibility for white is bishop c4. The Fischer-Sozin attack. A variation originally created by the Soviet master Sozin but popularized by Bobby Fischer. Initially, it was thought that this move was ineffective against the Najdorf variation, since once black has made the move a6, black will gain a tempo by advancing with b5, as the white bishop will be attacked. However, even with tempo losses, the white bishop will be very active on the a2, g8 diagonal, from where it will exert significant pressure against the e6 and f7 points. Black can play e6 to block the enemy bishop's action. White can play bishop b3. A good prophylactic move. The bishop retreats to a safer square, to which it would have to retreat sooner or later anyway, since black can advance with d5 or b5, which would attack the white bishop. At the same time, they avoid the possible tactic of knight taking e4, followed by d5. White's main plan is to castle kingside and then advance with f4 and f5 to increase the pressure against the e6 pawn. However, they can also move their queen and prepare for castling on the long side. The advance with e5 is a strategic error, as black would exchange his d6 pawn for the f4 pawn. However, the advance with e5 can be a good option if white manages to gain something concrete. Now, black has several possibilities, but the best and simplest is probably knight b to d7, with the idea of moving the knight to the c5 square, from where it will attack the bishop on b3. White can play f4, initiating the attack. After knight c5, the knight is very well positioned on the c5 square, as it attacks white's bishop, attacks the e4 pawn, and strengthens the defense of the e6 pawn. White can try f5, increasing the pressure on the e6 pawn. But black plays bishop e7, developing his king's bishop and preparing to castle. Black can eliminate the bishop on b3 at any time and has very good play. For example, in the case of the queen on f3, with the idea of castling queenside. Black can castle. White can play bishop e3, completing the development of his minor pieces and preparing to castle longside. Black can play e5, to expel white's knight from the center. After knight d to e2, black plays knight takes b3, eliminating white's bishop. After it takes b3, black plays b5, with the idea of developing his queen's bishop on the b7 square. He can then advance with b4 to divert white's knight from defending the e4 pawn. Black can attack the e4 pawn and can also apply pressure along the c-file, and has very good play. The key is that now it's not possible to move the knight to take b5, trying to take advantage of the pin along the a-file, as black plays d5 and gains an advantage. After he takes d5. Knight takes d5, the game will open up, and black's bishops will be very powerful. For example, if the rook is on d1, black plays e4. And after the queen, he takes e4. Black plays the bishop to b7. The game has opened up, and black's bishops are becoming very active. For example, if the rook is on c4, black plays the knight to take e3, and white's queen is under attack. After the queen, he takes e3. Black plays the bishop to h4, check. After g3, black plays the bishop to g5, and white's position is on the verge of collapse. The Najdorf variation is one of the best and most complex defenses black can play. I encourage you to try this defense in your games, as it will give you very good chances of winning. Please share your results and leave your experiences with this defense in the comments.